All right, Senator Sullivan, thank you so much for coming in.
Yes,
we really
good to see
appreciate you taking some
Anytime.
time. Yeah, so right off the bat, you just described Alaska as the location for this summit, calling it a power move. Why is that?
Well, I think it's a power move, because Putin is here because of the threat of sanctions. He just didn't show up. Remember, he's been very difficult to pin down. The president is frustrated. Putin has said he's never going to negotiate with Zelensky. And all of a sudden he's meeting with the president. He's meeting with the president because the president threatened him with massive secondary sanctions. These are the sanctions that would go after the buyers of Russian oil and gas, and it would devastate his economy. I'm one of the lead co-sponsors of a bill that would do something similar. So that threat, if you remember, was actually for last Friday, a couple days ago, and now he's here. So that's one. But I also think that Putin understands strength and power. When you're dealing with these kind of dictators, that's their language, not soaring rhetoric, because you can't trust what he says. It's what he sees. And I think Alaska, in that regard, exudes American power. We have a huge military presence, fifth generation, over 100 fifth generation fighters. We're the cornerstone of missile defense for America. We have a new airborne division, or U.S. Army Airborne Division, and we are also a huge supplier of American energy, and that is one of the best powers that pushes back against the Russians, because they use energy as a weapon. So that, and then as I mentioned, our allies, it's a huge comparative advantage we have over most other powers, certainly over powers like Russia and China. We are an ally-rich country. Those countries are ally-poor. And we have a lot of allies in Alaska right now. We have big military exercises, Arctic Edge, Northern Edge, and having our allies up here. The president's been working closely with our European and NATO allies all week. These are indications of power, and I think that's the way you make progress with a dictator like Putin.
And what are some of the pieces at play that you think will make this ceasefire agreement happen?
Well, look, I think, when you look at the complexity of a peace agreement like this, it is very complex. It is very difficult. It entails a whole number of things, but the ceasefire would be the beginning. Then you look at issues like who gets what territory. Then you look at issues like security guarantees and maybe additional sanctions. But I think the goal of this summit, and the president has talked about it, is almost like a table setting for future negotiations with Zelensky, with the Europeans, if Putin agrees to a ceasefire. He has not agreed to a ceasefire at all in the last several months, and I think the president is going to press him on that. I think he's going to take the measure of Putin if he's serious about that. And the president said, hey, if we have a serious ceasefire, then we will move on to the next steps, which would include Zelensky, include our NATO allies. If he's not serious, as the president said, it could be a quick meeting, and severe consequences would follow. I think in the president's mind, that probably means very significant sanctions.
Okay. An international media outlet reported Thursday that the U.S. might bargain with Russia for a ceasefire using Alaskan resources, including rare earth minerals. Is there any validity to this report? What do you think about it?
Yeah, look, my view is we have enough American companies, and our allies are interested in Alaska's resources, developing out of resources. The Trump administration has been great about promoting Alaska resources. We don't need any Russian investment. I would not support that. I don't think that is a serious proposal right now. And look, as I mentioned earlier, what we've seen here is a great shift with this administration from the previous administration, the Biden administration, who didn't let us develop our resources. You might remember that the Biden administration issued 70 executive orders against Alaska to shut us down, more than they did against Iran and Venezuela, terrorist nations. So it's very refreshing to have the Trump administration wanting to help us. On day one, President Trump issued an executive order called Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Resource Potential. That's all about helping our economy, helping jobs. So I think they're going to continue to focus on that. I'm highly skeptical of that news report, and I wouldn't support that.
The role of Alaska's energy supply is coming up frequently in the context of this summit. Governor Mike Dunleavy told me on Wednesday he plans to update President Trump on the status of the Alaska Pipeline project. He has FaceTime with him on Friday. And the governor also suggested, which is interesting that you talked about sanctions on Russian oil purchasers. The governor suggested global markets like Europe, China, India could end the war by no longer funding it on Russia's end by drying out their coffers through not buying their energy, and suggested American energy as an alternative. Would sanctions be, for lack of a better word, not a chess move, but would they inadvertently or advertently support American energy supply?
Yeah, absolutely.
Globally?
It's a great point, right? If we're telling China and India and Brazil, big buyers of Russian oil and gas, hey, you're going to be sanctioned by us big time, they will be looking for alternative sources of energy. I actually had a recent meeting with the Indian ambassador, and he said, hey, we are trying to buy American LNG, we are trying to buy American oil, but during the Biden administration, John Kerry came over and said, don't buy American oil and gas. This is a frustration, and one of the many frustrations I have with President Biden and his team. The climate czar, John Kerry, would go over to Japan, would go over to Korea, and tell them not to buy American and Alaskan LNG. Made no sense whatsoever. So now, to your point, we have a great opportunity. I think these countries want to buy American oil, American gas, particularly LNG from Alaska. So it's a great opportunity right now. And the other thing, Japan, for example, is still buying Russian oil and gas. Okay? We shouldn't want our close allies buying Russian oil and gas, particularly at this moment. We should be encouraging them to buy Alaskan LNG and Alaskan oil. We have this renaissance going on our North Slope in terms of oil development. The LNG project is making great progress, and thanks in part to President Trump. So it's a great move. I like your analogy of a chess move that, hey, we can sanction Russia and highlight and promote our resources, and I think that's a great move.
Does Alaska and U.S. energy supply, does it amount to enough to replace, in the event of sanctions, does it replace Russia's supply of energy?
Well, certainly LNG. You know, once we get our LNG project up and running, we have enough LNG on the North Slope to supply Alaska, our military, and Japan and Korea and Taiwan for 50 to 100 years, I guess. So the answer on LNG, certainly, when it comes to displacing Russian gas for Alaskan LNG. Oil, we're developing more oil. We're reversing our decline curve on the North Slope. Hopefully, we're going to be hitting 700,000 barrels a day here in a couple of years, maybe even getting up to 1 million barrels a day. That was a goal that I tried to achieve when I was the DNR commissioner, said that we can do that. So we have a longer way to go on oil, but in terms of our supplies of gas, we can supply our allies in Asia for decades, and they don't need to rely on Russian gas.
The last question. Okay, and let's pivot back around now to Friday morning.
Yeah.
What is your role in the summit? Are you planning to talk to President Trump? And I would like to know what you plan to talk to him about. Like, what's the most important thing he needs to hear from you tomorrow?
Well, look, I'll be meeting with President Trump when he arrives tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to thank him, right? As I mentioned, everything that he's doing with regard to Alaska is the polar opposite of what Joe Biden did. Biden was about shutting us down, killing jobs. President Trump and his team have been about unleashing Alaska energy and unleashing and building up our military. So I'm going to thank him for that, and I'm going to continue to advocate for those things and just make the case, hey, that helps with regard to our state, but it helps with regard to your diplomacy. When the Russians and Putin see the strength of America as epitomized in Alaska, I think that's how you get to where you want to be in terms of this peace agreement. So I'm going to thank him and also give him an update on what we're doing, particularly with regard to our military. You know, we commissioned this new icebreaker in Juneau, the Storis. I actually had a phone call with the President just a couple days ago. We talked a lot about that because he's been a strong promoter of icebreakers, rebuilding our Coast Guard, and a lot of that has taken place here. So I'm going to give him an update on that commissioning, which was a really big milestone that he actually set the wheels in motion on during his first term with the idea of purchasing a commercially available icebreaker and getting it home ported in Alaska. We did it on Sunday.
All right, Senator Sullivan, thank you so much.
Augusta, thanks very much.
I appreciate you.